This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Zimbabwe's president cuts short foreign tour over protests in his home country. Concerns in South Sudan and Somalia over UN peacekeeping funding shortfall. And UK Prime Minister addresses Parliament on Brexit plans. Hello and welcome to Africa Live on CGTN with me, Beatrice Marshall, in Nairobi. We'll bring you the details on those stories and others in just a moment. But first, Uche Okuronko with the day's business headlines. Uche.
Thank you, Beatrice. And here's a look at what's coming up on Africa Live Biz. The IMF cuts its global economic growth projections to 3.5% in 2019. And South Sudan begins rehabilitation work at oil fields which were damaged during the recent fighting. Of course, all that coming up within the program. For now, it's back to you.
Uche, thank you. And let's begin in Zimbabwe and a developing story where President Emmerson Mnangagwa has cut short an international trip and is returning home Monday. His return comes in the wake of deadly riots that were experienced in the country last week. Mnangagwa was on a five-nation tour to Russia, Belarus, Azerbaijan and Kazakhstan to drum up investment for his country.
Since he's been gone, Emmerson Mnangagwa's country has been engulfed by chaos after a shock 150% hike in the price of fuel. On Sunday, he took to Twitter to announce he won't be proceeding to the World Economic Forum in Davos and will instead come back home to get Zimbabwe calm, stable and working again. When he returns, he'll find a country still on edge. After a week of drama, it is back to a familiar routine for some Zimbabweans. Queuing for cash, for instance, which remains in short supply, as does fuel and some basic commodities. It is these challenges that are causing growing frustration amongst citizens who are looking to their government for some speedy solutions. That may require authorities to bite the bullet and make tough decisions.
I think we need to do away with the bought note and bring back the Zim dollar. Also, government should address the fuel crisis because that's what ignited all the violence and is causing price madness.
His bus fare to town has doubled since the fuel price increase. Zimbabwe's treasury has mooted plans to reintroduce a local currency this year, amongst a cocktail of other measures that are hoped will stabilize the economy. But there is growing sentiment here that fixing things requires all hands, even those from across the political divide, on deck. Mnangagwa has been urged to reach out on his return.
I think that he needs to go above the petty politics that is being peddled by his He needs the support of the labor movements. He needs the support of citizens of this country on his vision to revive Zimbabwe's economy.
On Monday, normalcy had returned to the capital Harare after security assurances from government, which has begun providing public transport to cushion commuters from the fuel price increase. Farai Mwakutuya, CGTN, Harare, Zimbabwe.
And we can cross over to Farai now. He's in Harare for us. Farai, it's been a few weeks of tough times there for Zimbabwe. Could you give us an update on how the day has been across the country?
Well, Beatrice, it was pretty much life back to normal here, certainly in Harare Central Business District. Shops were opened, people were going about their normal business. Public transport was plying all the roads and ferrying people to and from work, and there was certainly reduced security presence. Certainly no army officers that we came across, and police officers were stationed at just a few strategic points. And I think that is pretty much giving a sense that life is getting back to normal, back to business as usual. And the sentiment that I certainly picked up from people I spoke to is that they are keen to get back to their ordinary lives, get back to the lives that they're used to. Many Zimbabweans are now informally employed, running their own businesses and enterprises. And the longer, that there are disruptions, the more financial ruin they potentially face. So people are keen to get back to business, get back to working. Parents eager for their children to get back to school because, they've also been disturbances. These disturbances have affected the school calendar. Kids haven't gone to school for the past week. So life back to normal pretty much, and not just in Harare, but certainly from what we're hearing across the entire country.
Well, Farai, President Mnangagwa has now cut short his trips abroad, his state visits abroad. What should we expect now that he has returned?
Well, he's on his way back. He's en route to Zimbabwe and is expected here much later tonight. I think what many people will expect and look to him is for him to address the unrest and violence that has been witnessed here over the past few days. In particular, the loss of lives. At least, we reportedly about 12 people have lost their lives. Lots more have been injured. And people will expect him to speak to that, to address that, to make sure that those who are responsible, whether they be the rioters or the security forces, are held to account and brought to book, especially in light of that post-election violence witnessed on August 1st and the Commission of Inquiry that recommended that, responses to riots and things like this should be commensurate with the threat that is posed. So people will expect him to address that, given the lives that have been lost and the damage that has, been witnessed here. But crucially, I think people also expect him to come up with some sort of immediate pronouncement that will calm nerves, calm the anxieties, and get people to settle back down again. We know that civil servants have been offered an immediate, cost of living adjustment. As of today, government is providing subsidized buses and transport for commuters, so they're cushioned from some of these increases in the fuel price. But I think people also expect Mnangagwa to give something that is more immediate, that will translate into an easing into the hardships that they're facing. Perhaps, people will look for him to announce some deals that he's come back with that will immediately make a difference in their lives.
Well, Farai, very briefly though, there are indications that there has been a crackdown on opposition figures and arrests. What do we know about that situation?
Well, we know that certain opposition members have been arrested. We know that some councillors, opposition MDC councillors here in Harare, we know that the organizing secretary of the MDC Alliance has also been arrested. We know anti-government activists and leaders of civic society organizations, this flag pastor Ivan Mawarire, have been picked up and are currently, behind bars waiting, to be taken to the courts to face these charges. Government says that they are responsible for inciting people to engage in violence, inciting people to go and loot and damage property. I think the sense that we also get is that government is keen to ensure that they use some of these people that have been apprehended as an example, for lack of a better term, to throw at them the law, the full might of the law, to get maximum sentences, to expedite their trials, and to set an example that, in future, people should not, while people have a right to engage in protests, people should not engage in violence, in criminal activity, in terror, as this has been, categorized.
Farai Mwakatuya for us there in Harare with that update on Zimbabwe. South Sudan's government says the lack of funds for UN peacekeepers stationed in the country will negatively affect the implementation of the peace deal. Juba's latest agreement provides for deployment of more UN troops in the country from the East African region to help with the implementation of the accord. CGTN's Patrick Oyet reports.
South Sudan currently hosts 16,000 UN troops. Of those, China contributes 800. The current peace deal provides for more troops to be brought in from countries such as Uganda, Sudan and Somalia. The troops are planned to come to the country under UN command. South Sudan's government says it's now concerned that a cut in the funds for the UN troops will negatively impact the peace deal, since more troops intended to help with the implementation of the peace deal may not be deployed. The peacekeepers have been providing protection for more than 200,000 South Sudanese people who have been forced to flee their homes as a result of the war, which began in 2013. Currently, the peacekeepers are still protecting 190,000 civilians who are yet to return to their own homes because they still fear for their lives. But a unit of peacekeepers from Ghana has also been accused of sexual assaults in South Sudan. They have since been withdrawn from the UN mission. Just last week, another peacekeeper is reported to have shot and killed 2 South Sudanese nationals. The UN says it's investigating the incident. South Sudan's government says with peace returning, the UN troops should now be turning their focus on capacity building of the country's armed forces. The UN peacekeepers are also tasked with improving infrastructure in South Sudan, such as building roads and bridges. Patrick Oyet, CGTN, Juba, South Sudan.
Well, similar concern has been raised in Somalia. CGTN's Abdulaziz Bello has more from Mogadishu.
The United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres has warned that a funding shortfall will likely to affect active peacekeeping missions spearheaded by the global body. Guterres noted that the global body required close to $2 billion to sustain 14 peacekeeping operations, half of which are in Africa. The shortfall is expected to affect the United Nations Guard Unit, a defensive military entity mandated to protect UN staff and installations in Somalia, formed in 2014 with close to 400 soldiers. Experts, however, say that the funding shortfall will not have a major effect on AMISOM activities. The multinational regional force has more than 21,000 troops battling Al-Shabaab militants since 2007. The peacekeeping mission is operated by the African Union with the approval of the United Nations Security Council.
Somalia receives a very small fraction of the total UN budget. If we combine the salaries of soldiers, staff, and even contractors, it's not more than $1 billion. It's the same for UN missions across Africa. They are not that costly compared to the rest of the world.
The United States and the European Union are the biggest donors to the African Union mission that is assisting the Mogadishu government secure the country from Africa's deadliest terrorist group. Al-Shabaab, with an estimated force of close to 5,000 fighters, is seeking to topple the internationally backed governments in Somalia for over a decade now. But the UN-backed African Union force has in recent years turned the tide against the group that once controlled a large territory of land in Somalia, allowing for the formation of regional states. A UN assistance mission based in Mogadishu is also assisting in state formation process, finalizing the constitution, democracy, rule of law, and coordinating humanitarian efforts. The global body is also mentoring the country's security services. It supports police officers, including with stipend salary payments, logistics, uniforms, and training. Authorities say that they're in the process of strengthening the country's security apparatus, a move experts say will allow Mogadishu to take charge of national security. It also wants an end to UN sanctions to allow it to better equip its armed forces, a move experts say will mark an end to all UN peacekeeping operations in the Horn of African nation. Abdulaziz Bello, CGTN, Mogadishu, Somalia.
Well, let's discuss this further, and I'm joined live in Addis Ababa by Meresa Kasu, a senior researcher at the Institute for Security Studies. Thank you for joining us here on Africa Live. Let's start here in East Africa, because Somalia and South Sudan, both countries' stability highly depends on peacekeeping operations. How concerned should the region be over this funding shortfall?
Thank you, Michelle, for having me. My view on the question is, like other missions, peace operations in Africa, the mission in the UN mission in South Sudan and the African Union mission in Somalia both needs more support, more financial support and logistical support as well. But this comes the role of peacekeeping these days is changing to the region, like the AU is taking more responsibilities, and also the region, the sub-region is also taking more responsibilities on the umbrella of the United Nations, of course, with the mandate of the Security Council. But the world these days are not considering the regional lead peace operations like AMISOM. So the issue of finances is a concern and critical for the Horn of Africa, I mean for the African Union and the mission in South Sudan as well.
Let's take a look at the responsibility of the international community here, because as you mentioned, the region is now taking more responsibility over its stability. But how can the UN and the international community, though, provide additional assistance to African troop contributing countries in terms of personnel, training and equipment?
Yes, I think my view is the rest of the world are having their own priorities, maybe like Europe, the concern on European areas, and the Westerners on their own affairs and have their own priorities. And they are not, like, it seems like they don't give the priorities of peacekeeping in Africa. I think that is the reason. So maybe if they really consider and then understand the problems in Africa, the problem in Africa is not only remain being in Africa, but it also affects the rest of the world. And then as Africans contribute troop and the police, and the rest of the world also must contribute in terms of finance and in terms of logistics, in terms of personnel, experts as well.
Right.
So how the question how is the UN Secretary General came up with Action for Peace initiative, and the Action for Peace initiative is well explained how peacekeeping operation in Africa can be effective. So the solution is to implement the initiatives.
Maresa Kasu joining us there from Addis Ababa in Ethiopia. Thank you. We'll now take a short break on the program, but still ahead. Nigeria and the president and key opposition parties boycott presidential debate ahead of the polls. And in the Democratic Republic of Congo, Felix Tshisekedi swearing in to be postponed to allow for more talks.
You don't find the stories of North Africa by sitting on the sidelines.
You've got to get out, go there, and you'll find them. In the bazaars of Casablanca, among the crowds in Cairo,
who come to visit Cairo, the ancient capital of Egypt.
Along the waters of the Nile, along the sands of the Sahara. No one else will take you where we can in North Africa. No one else will show you what it's all about. CGTN, see the difference.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
UK Prime Minister Theresa May has just been laying out her plans to break the deadlock over Brexit. Her address to Parliament came a week after her agreement with the European Union was resoundingly rejected.
With regard to the backstop, despite the changes we have previously agreed, there remain two core issues: the fear that we could be trapped in it permanently, and concerns over its potential impact on our union if Northern Ireland is treated differently from the rest of the UK. So I will be talking further this week to colleagues, including in the DUP, to consider how we might meet our obligations to the people of Northern Ireland and Ireland in a way that can command the greatest possible support in the House. and I will then take the conclusions of those discussions back to the EU. From other parts of this House, concerns have also been raised over the political declaration. In particular, these have focused on a wish for further precision around the future relationship. The political declaration will provide the basis for developing our detailed negotiating mandate for the future, and this new phase of negotiations will be different in a number of ways. It will cover a far broader range of issues in greater depth, and so will require us to build a negotiating team that draws on the widest expertise available, from trade negotiators to security experts and specialists in data and financial services.
So it's another big day in the UK Parliament. For more on this, I'm joined by CGTN's Mariam Zaidi. She's on College Green by the Houses of Parliament. Mariam, so Theresa May has revealed her Plan B. What are the details?
Well, as you're saying, Theresa May, in the last hour or so, has, of course, made her statement to Parliament on what we expected to be her Plan B on Brexit. She, of course, has been really trying to break the Brexit gridlock and find a way that the UK can leave the EU in an orderly way, i.e. with her deal, after the deal that she, of course, negotiated with the EU was royally dismissed by MPs last week. Now, addressing MPs at her dispatch box, May said something had to change. But if you were looking for a concrete Plan B, well, she simply didn't offer one. She just said that wide-ranging consultations, as you were saying there, are to continue. Now, she again shot down talk of a second referendum, plus said the only way to block a no-deal Brexit from happening is to vote for a deal, so her deal. Now, interestingly, on Sunday, the UK papers were awash with the idea that somehow May would try and get rid of this Irish backstop problem by offering Ireland a bilateral treaty of sorts and perhaps rejigging the Good Friday Agreement that, of course, brought peace to the island of Ireland. Now, that was never going to work. Individual EU countries just don't make deals. The EU, as a bloc, makes deals with other countries. And today, before May addressed the Commons, both Simon Coveney, the Irish Deputy Prime Minister, and Michel Barnier, who is the EU lead Brexit negotiator, rubbished all of those reports. Barnier said the EU27 are one team and they negotiate as one. The UK could no doubt, of course, learn a little bit of collective spirit from the EU's approach. So May, when she was speaking earlier on today, she added that she respects the Belfast Agreement and that they were never looking to reopen it. And of course, these
Apologies for that, but Mariam Zaidi for us there in London. Thank you. Let's look at other stories we are following for you today on the program. Authorities in the Democratic Republic of Congo have postponed the inauguration of the president-elect, Felix Tshisekedi, to Thursday, the 24th of January. The declaration of Mr. Tshisekedi as the winner of the polls was disputed by the runner-up Martin Fayulu, but the courts upheld the decision. CGTN's Chris Ochamringa has more from Kinshasa.
The swearing-in ceremony of the newly declared president of the DRC was originally supposed to be held on Tuesday, but the Congolese government has postponed it to Thursday. The Communications Ministry confirmed the postponement to CGTN, saying it's to allow enough time for the ceremony to be organized. Invitations are being sent out to heads of state and the venue is being readied for the event. The declaration of Mr. Tshisekedi's victory was challenged in court by the runner-up Martin Fayulu. The court, however, dismissed the appeal. Mr. Fayulu rejected the court ruling and urged his supporters to hold a peaceful demonstration, but the police say that will not be allowed.
We have not authorized any procession on the streets. They can only gather inside their party offices if they wish.
Hundreds of Mr. Fayulu's supporters gathered outside their party office to denounce what they called a stolen election. Tensions are high ahead of Thursday's inauguration. Chris Ochamringa, CGTN, Kinshasa, Democratic Republic of Congo.
Another election and a number of presidential candidates in Nigeria have taken part in a televised debate ahead of next month's elections. However, the event only featured 5 out of 73 presidential aspirants, and the two political heavyweights, President Muhammadu Buhari and the main opposition candidate Atiku Abubakar, boycotted the debate. CGTN's Philly Haza brings us reactions of Nigerian voters.
Please give a warm welcome as I bring in the candidates to the stage in alphabetical order.
Presidential candidates for the 2019 elections are placed on the spot to defend their manifestos to millions of voters nationwide. but only 3 of 5 aspirants invited are present.
The most important thing we have to do is to strengthen our institutions. Number one, we must make it difficult for people to steal by making sure that the processes are transparent.
We have no business being the world capital of poverty. That is why I am running for office. I bring with me the track record of being able to fix problems.
There is no more important investment than investing in the security of our lives and our property with a police force that can check kidnapping like any modern police force anywhere in the world.
As a Nigerian,
President Muhammadu Buhari of the ruling All Progressives Congress APC, who is seeking to lead the country for another 4 years, and his main opponent Atiku Abubakar of the People's Democratic Party PDP were absent at the debate. President Buhari, who also shunned the 2015 presidential debate when he was the main opposition contender, said he was too busy campaigning to attend. The PDP flag bearer, who earlier stated that he would not take part in the debate if President Buhari was absent, is now challenging the president to another contest before the election next month. Analysts say shunning an event like this may not be healthy for the country's democratic process.
Debate is a culture of democracy all over the world. The actors come out to participate and show the electorate, what they have for them. To skip a debate shows lack of respect for the electorate. I think what should be done by the lawmakers need to interfere in this whole process. There should be law that debates are compulsory. That's what will solve the problems in the future.
However, many Nigerians say their choices are not influenced by debates.
I will surely come and vote. The debate doesn't really concern me because I've seen both parties' manifesto, so I've decided on whom I'm going to vote.
I'm not disappointed that the main candidate did not participate in the debate last night. I've already known the person I'm going to vote for, and the debate has nothing to change in me of the person I'm going to vote for.
I didn't watch the debate because immediately the two, the PDP and the APC candidates, they only pulled out, so I didn't see the debate interesting any longer.
Economic instability, corruption and insecurity remain a challenge for Nigeria's nearly 200 million population and are key issues in the elections.
On 16th of February, millions of Nigerians will be heading to the polls to elect a leader that will be in charge of the country's affairs for another 4 years. But they haven't yet seen the two front-runners facing off in a televised debate. Phil Ihaza, CGTN, Abuja, Nigeria.
And moving now to education matters in Algeria. A local institute has started offering training in robotics for children between 7 and 12 years. The goal of the Robotics Academy is to equip children to master the science of programming and their capacity to excel in the technological age.
Since its inception in 2017, the Robotics Academy has hosted dozens of children each month, helping them to master the science of programming.
In developed countries around the world, the curriculum contains teaching materials to teach children computer and robot programming. And we have transferred this idea and experience to Algeria through our academy, which is a great opportunity for our children to learn the basics of programming and robotics.
The institute targets children aged between 7 and 12 years who are taking practical classes on robot models and video games. The designers are helping them to initiate using advanced programs and applications.
They learn here all the basics of program management, background and animation, and then we challenge them to find solutions that will learn them logic, scientific thinking and creativity.
After learning the concepts, the children become more familiar with the application during the installation and programming of the robot.
This is important to develop when my son learns programming techniques. He will gradually learn how to handle the machine.
I told my dad to enroll me at the Robotics Academy to learn more about robotics, apps and games.
The institute hopes to expand its programs into the national educational program in Algeria to ensure all children are able to learn the basics of software and computer science in this age of cutting-edge technology. Beryl Oro, CGTN.
And here's a quick recap now of the headlines this hour. Zimbabwean President Emmerson Mnangagwa has cut short an international trip and will return home Monday in the wake of deadly riots that were experienced in the country last week. Mnangagwa was on a 5-nation tour to Russia, Belarus, Azerbaijan and Kazakhstan to drum up investment for his country. Since he's been gone, Zimbabwe has been engulfed in chaos after a 150% hike in the price of fuel. This has led to protests in various parts of the country. Now, both Somalia and South Sudan have expressed concern over UN peacekeeping missions budget gaps. South Sudan says the lack of funds for UN peacekeepers in the country will negatively affect the implementation of the peace deal. Cuba's latest agreement provides for deployment of more UN troops to the East African region to help with the implementation of the accord. Somalia, on the other hand, says the funding shortfall will slow down progress made in the fight against Al-Shabaab militants. Authorities in the Democratic Republic of Congo have postponed the inauguration of the president-elect Felix Tshisekedi to Thursday, the 24th of January. The declaration of Tshisekedi as the winner of the polls was disputed by the runner-up Martha Fayulu, but the courts upheld the decision. In the meantime, 4 opposition supporters have been arrested, while hundreds of others stopped from attending a rally organized by the opposition leader. And UK Prime Minister Theresa May has scrapped the £65 million fee for millions of EU citizens that were going to have to pay to secure the right to continue living in the UK after Brexit. It came as the Prime Minister made a statement to members of Parliament on how she plans to get them back to a Brexit deal. She said she would have further discussions with Northern Ireland's DUP and others on their concerns about the Irish backstop. And that's a look at the headlines. Well, let's now go to Uche Okoronkwo for a look at the latest business news. Uche.
Thank you, Beatrice. And here's a look at what's coming up on Africa Live Biz. The IMF cuts global economic growth projections to 3.5% in 2019. And South Sudan begins rehabilitation work at oil fields which were damaged during the recent fighting.
Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and global business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues from taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN.
Business in Africa is at the crossroads, where opportunity meets innovation, where profitable new markets collide with global trends. From the sound of an African bell on a stock market's floor, to the shout of the trader in a bustling free market. It's colorful, vibrant and exotic. CGTN stands at the gateway to Europe, Africa and the Middle East. From Morocco to South Africa, we talk to the deal makers and actors who fuel its engines of growth. Only on CGTN.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Well, let's start off with the International Monetary Fund World Economic Outlook. According to the IMF, it suggests that the weakening expansions is in most parts of the world. And once again, it has revised down its global growth forecast for this year and the next as well. Take a look.
The International Monetary Fund said in its updated outlook that weakness in the second half of 2018 will carry over to coming quarters. That has caused projected global growth to decline to 3.5% in 2019, before picking up slightly to 3.6% in 2020. Those forecasts were revised downward last October, partly because of the negative effects of a tariff war between the United States and China earlier last year. And trade policy would remain as one of the major uncertainties to hurt growth. IMF said in the report that world trade growth has slowed to well below 2017 averages, and that the underlying impetus could be even weaker. Commodity prices, financial conditions in both advanced and emerging economies, capital flows, and exchange rates were among other uncertainties. Specifically, growth in advanced economies is projected to ease from an estimated 2.3% in 2018 to 2% in 2019 and 1.7% in 2020. The developing world will also slow down pace this year before improving in 2020. The IMF also forecasts the Chinese economy to expand by 6.6% in 2018, same as the country's official result. With the global growth easing, the IMF believes a shared policy priority now should be to raise midterm growth prospects while enhancing economic inclusion. Countries are advised to boost multilateral cooperation and optimize domestic policies, including lifting productivity, diversifying industry structures, raising labor force participation, and addressing debt burdens. Chuck Tinte, CGTN.
Meanwhile, British charity Oxfam is asking governments to hike tax rates for corporations and the super rich to tackle the growing global wealth gap. Now, recent data from the aid agency revealed that billionaire fortunes rose by $2.5 billion per day in 2018, recording an increase of 12% for the year. Now, as the fortunes of the rich grew, the half of the world's poorest saw their wealth decline by about 11%. This report, titled Public Good or Private Wealth, comes as delegates gather to discuss challenges of the global economic structure at the World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland.
So last year alone, we saw billionaire wealth increase by $2.5 billion every day, while the wealth of the bottom half of humanity, $3.8 billion, was dropping by $500 million a day. This is a trend. It just doesn't happen just once. So we're seeing some progress, but not enough. So we're here in Davos, I'm here in Davos, to call on governments to wake up and take up their responsibility and tax fairly, tax wealth, and put money in the public services that people need.
Well, let's head to South Sudan now. The country has begun to repair and pump oil from its damaged wells during the civil war. The nation currently produces about 160,000 barrels of oil per day, but the reopening of the wells is expected to add about 12,000 barrels per day, rising the production level to around 70,000 by the end of this year. Now, South Sudan's oil infrastructure was badly damaged in its civil war, which broke out back in 2013. The nation's neighboring state, Sudan, receives between 9 to 11 barrels of oil from the East Central state. Meanwhile, South Africa's Competition Tribunal has fined leading retailer Shoprite about $1.4 million, and that's after its ticket-selling subsidiary, CompuTicket, was found guilty of abuse of dominance. Now, the case has been dragging on for about a decade now, complicated by the ownership of CompuTicket switching from Naspers to Shoprite. The tribunal's decision follows an earlier investigation by the Competition Commission into the company's use of long-term exclusive agreements. However, CompuTicket, which was acquired by the retailer in November of 2005, is planning to appeal against the Competition Tribunal's decision. And in North Africa, Egypt has signed a deal with Jordan to supply the kingdom with half of its needs of natural gas to generate electricity. Egypt's latest gas discoveries in the Mediterranean Sea has made the North African state self-sufficient in natural gas. With the details, here's CGTN's Yasser Hakim in Cairo.
The statements by both sides did not specify the exact amount of natural gas to be supplied to Jordan, but it could exceed a previous agreement signed in 2004, whereby Egypt had provided the kingdom with 250 million cubic feet per day of natural gas.
After
the 2011 uprising, the surge of terrorism led to continuous attacks more than 12 times on the Egyptian pipelines that reached Israel and Jordan. The absence of security and failure to protect the damaged pipelines forced the government to take a decision to cancel all its contracts with Israel and Jordan in 2012.
This had led to an economic crisis in Jordan, as 80% of its electricity and fuel output depended on Egypt's natural gas. It resorted to the more expensive Israeli and European options. But after the political stability and latest Dhuhr gas discoveries in the Mediterranean Sea, Egypt has been able to resume exports to Jordan.
Israel reduced its supply to Jordan in order to meet its growing local needs, while the industrial growth in Jordan required even more gas consumption. Egypt, which now produces over 6 billion cubic feet of gas per day, has stepped in to revive its previous contracts. Egyptian companies like Petrojet are also establishing the infrastructure to install natural gas in Jordanian homes and replace fuel for energy and electricity.
So the gas deal comes at the right time for the kingdom. It provides badly needed and affordable source of energy that will benefit the people and the industries alike in Jordan. Yes, Hakim for CGTN, Cairo.
Meanwhile, French multinational cement company Lafarge is planning to acquire Kenya's East Africa's Portland Cement Company. Now, the firm already holds about 41.7% stake in the firm. It is in talks to purchase the remaining stake from the government and other shareholders. The cement maker is in dire financial distress at the moment. They need about $146 million lifeline in order to operate at its bare minimum. The company's current liabilities exceed its assets by about $59 million from about $41.3 million in 2017. Well, that's all for now on Africa Live Biz, but coming up on Global Business Africa, South Africa rejects Zimbabwe's a Zimbabwe loan request of about $1.2 billion. Of course, we'll be examining this top of the hour on Global Business Africa. For now, it's back to you, Beatrice.
Uche, thank you. And we still have more news for you here on the program. Here's what's ahead. We'll be taking you to South Africa, where a classic car enthusiast showcases an array of vintage cars.
When you look at Africa, what do you really see? Do you see fast-growing, endless deserts and parched earth? Or do you see the biggest opportunity for an agricultural revolution in a generation? Do you see crowded, unplanned cities or vast, untapped markets? Do you see a population at risk, or do you see a billion-strong opportunity to grow the next wave of multi-billion-dollar firms in Africa? When you look at Africa, what do you really see? Join us in Global Business and see Africa through our eyes.
The greatest journeys, the greatest sights, the greatest adventures.
Here in Panater, this weir allows the locals to walk on water.
We're far more than just TV news. We're your passport to the wonders of Africa.
To bring you stories of struggle, survival and hope.
So let's explore. CGTN. See the difference.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
In South Africa, classic car enthusiasts gathered in modern Fontaine, Gauteng province to showcase an astonishing array of vintage cars. Cars range from those built before 1910 to later classics dating up to 1985. CGTN's Relisa Njamela has more.
It's quite a colorful spectacle. Vintage, old-timers, customized and other special cars are showcased here at the Piston Ring Club in Modderfontein. The monthly gathering boasts some of the world's most sought-after collectors' cars, You name it, and you'll most likely find your favorite classic car here.
Classic or vintage cars are a real work of art, from the rarity of the cars, their performance, their originality, and their sheer beauty.
Each month, previously undiscovered classics emerge from lockups from around the province and head for this motoring celebration.
It's open to classic, all cars manufactured before 20 years and older, so before 99. And it doesn't matter, it's actually not only cars, it's all transport-related equipment, so anything with wheels.
For old car enthusiasts, this is a place to be at every month.
The Piston Ring pretty much makes provision for anybody that's got a classic. There's not too many car clubs or how can I say, venues that host an event of this scale where all marks of cars are welcome to join in their own respective club format, or even if you're not part of a club, you're still welcome to come to the grounds and enjoy yourself as such.
The Piston Ring is the largest car club of its type in South Africa, with over 800 members.
We still get cars that came in 1970 that collectors had then. Cars do change hands. In fact, we have 2 swap meetings every year where we have an area.
International